Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
All right, y'all. Welcome back to another day of online Canvas course for vocations. And today we're starting with the second myth, the idea that love, or especially love within marriage, is a 50-50 contract. Kind of shortened the explanation there. It's not. Now, the reason this one is so popular is that it fits really well on that kind of like greeting card philosophy, right? Like, it's marriage is half and half. Like, you gotta give a little bit and whatever, right? Like, we're in this together. We're a team. Um, the other explanation you might see is that no, it's not a 50-50 contract. It's actually 100%. Again, that math also doesn't work out, and neither is it the case really for what's going to make the best marriage possible. We're really at the idea of what is love within marriage all about. Well, two things that Jennifer and Chris Caxer are going to talk about in Chapter 2, which is the fact that it can't just be 50-50 because there's going to be something missing. At the same time, it can't be 100-100 because we're humans and we're not capable of that. At the same time, it's also not a contract, right? So on the one hand, it's not 50-50. On the other hand, it's not a covenant or a contract. It's going to be a covenant, right? Today, what we're going to focus on is that first part, the 50-50 part, and then tomorrow on Friday, what we'll talk about is the contract part, the difference between a contract marriage and a covenant marriage. Okay, so again, trying to make these videos a little bit quicker. Let's get right into it. Great scene from The Princess Bride. We'll start off with today. I'll post a link below this video. The idea of what is marriage, right? And so at the end of the movie at Princess Bride, the princess is about to marry the evil prince. His name is Humperdinck. And they're about to get married, and Wesley has yet to save the princess once and for all. And so it looks like all is lost and that the princess is going to, in fact, marry the prince. So we get to the part for the wedding, and the bishop here, who's explaining what marriage is all about, is kind of going a little too slow. And in the background, Wesley is about to save the princess, and so the prince has the bishop hurry up the ceremony. And so he says, just say man and wife, just say man and wife. And so the bishop says man and wife. And Princess Buttercup believes that she's now married. What you'll see in the next video, on the next slide, is that actually has nothing to do with them being married. The bishop proclaiming that they're man and wife. And part of this is the fact that in the Catholic idea of what marriage is, it's not the bishop, the priest who marries you, it's actually the couple themselves. You probably learned this in sacraments class. And the idea being that it's the vows, the exchange of vows from free persons, right? Free will, you can't be forced into it. Actually creates a new identity. And so that's we're kind of jumping ahead to what is marriage. Well, it's this new lived identity as one flesh, at least speaking biblically. So before the vows, you're just engaged. After the vows, you're married, and we're going to see that in the next video as well. But what Jennifer and Chris Caxer want us to take away from this, at least at the beginning, and we'll talk about why this relates to 50-50 in a second, is that you have a new identity now. That as a married couple, you're no longer the same as you were before. You are, for us, like we're the Flores family, right? You two become one, right? And that these vows are what we call a performative utterance. They actually do the thing that they signify. In the same way you can think of before someone's sworn into office, right? They are just so-and-so, and then they swear them, they say the words of the office, the oath of the office, right? And now they are the president, right? Like, remember from Effie, put his hand on, I don't know maybe it was the Bible, and he swears the oath to be the student body president. He is now the student body president. Before that, he's just the student body president elect. He's not yet the president. But in actually saying the oath, something changes. On the outside, Effie looks exactly the same, right? But there's actually an identity shift, right? So that when he does certain actions and things, you recognize, well, that's the president doing that, the president of the student body, right? So the same thing is happening in marriage. The couple's taken on a new identity. This is going to become incredibly important for this idea of 50-50 because anyone that views marriage or any kind of relationship as a 50-50, a give and take, is probably not thinking of it in a new identity form. They're probably thinking of it as, I myself, you're yourself, I'm going to give you a little bit what I got, you give me a little bit what you got, and as a team, we'll kind of work this out. But not as a one unit, right? But as individuals in this thing. And marriage is a little bit different. Why? Because true love is a little bit different, as we saw last class and as we'll see again today. So, your boy Chesterton, or really my boy, this is my favorite author from England. This is before Chesterton got a little bit bigger. This is him and his wife. Her name was Frances with an E, right? And I actually did my thesis on Chesterton when I was in college. And one of the things that I came across was a letter that he wrote to his wife before they were married. And I've always found this to be fairly inspirational and helpful. So he says, "There are 4 lamps of thanksgiving always before him, the man who's about to get married." Right? He says, the first is for his creation out of the same earth with such a woman as you. The second is that he has not, with all his faults, gone after strange women. You cannot think how a man's self-restraint is rewarded in this. The third is that he has tried to love everything alive, a dim preparation for loving you. And the fourth is, but no words can express that, here ends my previous existence. Take it, it led me to you. Now there's a couple of things going on there. The first is just this idea that I'm so glad to be alive, that first lamp of Thanksgiving, right? The second is that he hasn't fooled around. You could say it like that. It's probably how we would say it. The idea being that he's devoted himself to her even before even knowing her, right? The third is that, like, especially men, we try to go out and change the world, right? We have these grand ambitions about, I'm going to become the doctor that cures cancer. I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. And his point is that you've chased after all these things, only realizing that they weren't really what you were after. And then the fourth one, and I think this is the most important for today's lesson, is this, right? Here ends my previous existence. Everything that I was, everything that I had been, I am no longer that thing. I'm this new creation now with you, right? So take my previous existence. I'm no longer that. I am fully yours here. Okay, so I think that's a pretty cool way to think about why it's not such a 50-50 contract, at least initially. Okay, so what kind of love? Last time we talked about that there's this really great version of love called this erotic love, this desire to be with the beloved for this comprehensive unity. And that's true, that's good. But that's only part of it, right? We said love is a multi-dimensional reality. And you're probably going to want to have true and genuine erotic love within your marriage. At the same time, is that the kind of love that you can promise on the altar? And the authors say, well, no, it's actually not. The type of love that we're going to talk about is called agape. And we'll get to it in the next slide. But the idea is this, that you cannot promise erotic love on the altar because it is liable to change, right? It's part of the ebb and flow of the human life. Unfortunately, the video is not loading up here, but this is going to be the next part of The Princess Bride, so I'll post the video below the other video of Princess Bride. Because you can't always control erotic love. It's not the thing that you can promise on the altar. A lot of couples make that mistake, and so then they say, like, I love you till death do us part. They're thinking of erotic love, this passion, this desire, these feelings that are a part of that, right? And even if it's real love and not just sexual attraction, there's still that danger of being so caught up in the physical things, or you could say like that passionate emotional thing, that if that's the foundation of your marriage, it's an ebbing and flowing foundation, right? You want something solid. So the love that we're going to talk about for marriage is actually what's promised in the vows. It's called agape, or agapic love. And you've already seen this, so we don't need to go into it too much. It's the same love that we've been talking about, this idea of willing the good for the other person, appreciating the other person, and this desire for unity with the other person. That, again, it's going to have some elements, it's going to be, you could say, supported by true eros, right? This desire, this passion, right? At the same time, it's completely within the control of your will, that every day you choose to love the other person. And that's the kind of love you want to promise on the altar. That's the kind of love that's going to get you through sickness and health, good times and bad, till death do you part, right? You cannot promise to feel a certain way about someone till death do you part, but you can certainly promise to love them in the sense of willing the good for them till death do you part. So, back to 50-50. Why is it not a 50-50 kind of partnership here? Again, tomorrow we'll talk about the contract part, but today, why not 50-50? Okay, so if you're willing the good for the other person, if you're willing to lay down your life for them, right, this agapic love that says, I'm going to give of myself to you, then you don't want to hold anything back, right? You don't want to say, well, I'll only give you 50% of what I've got, or I'm only going to give you 50% of who I am, right? That's why that Chesterton line is so important. Here ends everything that I am before. I'm giving my entire self to you. Now, I also said, though, it wasn't a perfect 100%. And it's not that that wouldn't be great. It's just that that's not reality, right? That us as humans, we cannot actually give 100% to everything. You might think that there are certain sports stars, athletes that in fact can do that, but then something else in their life always lags behind. That's why we looked at that fourth level of friendship, that fourth level of happiness, this idea of infused virtue coming from the grace of God. And so what is it from a human side? It's actually probably closer to 75-20 in the sense that you can give about up to 75, maybe 80% of who you are to your spouse. And that extra 20% or whatever it is, God's going to fill in the gap there. Now, your aim is obviously 100. You want to give your entire self. You don't want to say, I'm still only going to give 80%. You want to give everything that you can. But there's also this understanding, this human element. What happens with the 50-50 mindset, and you'll see this in tomorrow's lesson with the contract view of marriage, is that the 50-50 mindset is still thinking about yourself a lot. Like, well, I'm giving half here. She's not doing her end of the bargain, right? Well, I'm working long hours at the office, and she's not doing X, Y, Z. That mindset is not helpful for this kind of agapic love, of always willing the good for the other person. This desire to help out the person in good times and bad, whether things are going well for you guys or not. If you're always counting the cost, right? Remember the prayer of generosity? If you're always keeping score, it's going to be very difficult to build up that virtue of agapic love in your marriage and your relationship. And you can probably see this with your friends, right? If you keep score with your friends, like, I've done X, Y, Z for him, I've done this and that and the other thing, and he's never done anything to me, well, that friendship's going to suffer, right? Well, the same thing is true in marriage. If you're always counting the cost, you're keeping score, it's going to be very difficult to have that true and genuine love, especially that self-sacrificial love, when you're always counting the cost, okay? So that's the first part of why I would say 50-50 is not the way to go. But at the same time, we want to put that little asterisk there that without God's help, we really can't do 100-100. With God's help, we can make up the gap, right? But we want to aim for 100, but ask God to help us out where we're lacking, okay? So don't forget, if you haven't already, finish the quiz. It won't have these notes on it, but go ahead and finish the quiz. It's called Fourth Quarter Quiz 1. I think I made it due actually on Friday morning. And then on Friday, we're going to come back and look at the contract view of marriage versus the covenant view of marriage and the differences between the two. You can think of it as this: the difference between a civil marriage and a church marriage. Why are they different? Why do we have two different versions of marriage? And I will see you then in the next one.